This is the Texas Land Guys podcast, hosted by brothers Tim Dosch and Tom Dosch. With their partners David Marshall and Tripp Rich, they have built DMRE, the leading land brokerage in Texas. With decades of experience brokering deals between landowners and real estate developers, they take you inside the deals that move the market.
So Tim, welcome to a special episode today. We're going to take a moment to talk about what we're seeing in the market. Today is Wednesday morning. It's April 9th that we're recording this. We'll try to release this in the next day or so. We normally release our episodes anywhere from a couple weeks to even, I think we've released probably 6 to 8 weeks after recording, just because for us, with how busy we are with our schedule, doing deals and working on a business, a lot of times we need to record these in batches and then release them at later dates. But with everything that's been happening related to tariffs and what we're seeing in the market and just pretty significant impact in the stock market right now, it's been a constant conversation we're having with our clients. And so I thought it'd be good today to release kind of a shortened special edition episode and just talk through a little bit of what we're seeing.
Yeah, it's probably something we'd like to do, over the, kind of as we continue forward this podcast, just getting to kind of address these big things that happen in the market that everybody's talking about, when it's happening, because it's kind of frustrating. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and sometimes when there's things happening in the market, you want to hear what people think about them. And when you're listening to a podcast, they never address it. You're like, well, I wonder what they're thinking. So that was kind of our point today, and just sitting down, doing a shorter episode and just talking about what we're hearing, what we think. This is all happening in real time. We don't know exactly what's going to happen or how it's going to play out. We're kind of watching it like everyone else, but it does have an impact on our business, and it's a part of the conversation. So I wanted to kind of address it this morning.
And Tim, you've always been really interested in politics. A lot of people probably don't know you were actually a political science major. So we're not going to say that we are economists or political experts in this episode, but really, we are observing a lot and seeing just a lot of different things from our clients, getting a lot of interesting anecdotes. And so maybe just to address some of maybe the comments we've made in the past about tariffs, we had some comments when we talked about just leading into the year, predictions for the year. We knew that tariffs was going to be a big topic because that was something that the Trump administration announced. And then also just as a quarterly update, our episode of just a couple of days ago that we released, we talked about the impact of what we were seeing. But things have really kind of ratcheted up into higher gear. And so maybe let's just start with kind of what we were talking about the last couple of days. Really the point you've been making is this is really more about the U.S. and China relations than it is about tariffs with a lot of these other countries at the end of the day.
Yeah, there's a Washington Post article I read yesterday that was talking about, about 70 countries are already negotiating with the U.S. at a pretty high level to remove tariffs. And so, whatever happens with those negotiations, I think that there's hopefully some progress being made that'll help. I think that this is really about the U.S. and China. And we've talked about, this is in a lot of ways, instead of having a hot war, with guns or with an actual war with China, we're having a financial war, this tariff war. And it's a clash that is going to have to happen with these two superpowers in the world and all the conflicting interests that we have. So it's not a very big surprise. I think the way it plays out is going to be interesting to watch. It doesn't benefit either country to get into a long-term battle with this, but it might be hard for either country to back down. I definitely don't think that Trump wants to back down. I mean, I think tonight they're talking about 104% tariffs going into effect with China. So I think what I do see that as a positive is the fact that we're going so extreme on the U.S. side with hitting them with these tariffs, and then they're kind of countering with these really high tariffs. Makes me feel like we're pushing everything to the point of having to get to the table at some point and work it out, because it's going to be so painful for both sides if we don't. If we were seeing these little tariffs, going back and forth at smaller percentages, I think that each side could weigh each other out longer. So we'll see. But I mean, this is, we've talked about, is this something where we're going to see a long-term decoupling of the economies, reduced trade between China and the U.S. long term? There's already a lot of onshoring that's been happening the last couple of years. Moving corporations, moving production to the United States, moving it to Mexico, and so that's already been happening, and I think it'll continue to happen.
Yeah, and I think that we've seen, obviously, I said this a minute ago, but significant impact to the stock market. There's been just a lot of selling. You're seeing just kind of day after day of losses. And what's interesting, what we've been talking about is that, the land business, obviously it's not a liquid asset. And so it does not respond in the same way that maybe the stock market does. And so you would maybe assume that we're having conversations with landowners, with developers, and this is getting brought up a lot. It is getting brought up, and we were just talking about this because we're listing some really well-located sites, and we're having hundreds of conversations a week on these sites, and no one has really told me yet that they're not going to pursue an opportunity because of this whole tariff situation. So I think the economics of just Texas, the economics that we've been talking about on the podcast with the fundamentals of development, whether that's just, housing development because of population growth, whether it's industrial development because of just the continued demand for logistics in our cities, or multifamily development because there's just an affordable housing crisis in these big cities. And so that, I think, is just important to remember, that the impact on land is probably not going to be felt unless you really are having to sell. Like, you're a seller that's in a situation where you've been holding out and you've gotten in a situation where you needed to sell in 2025 and you thought the market was going to come back really fast. Well, now I think this situation, we don't know how long this will go on. It could be quick, it could be, prolonged, but probably going to delay just the ability to go sell a land tract as quickly or for the same price that maybe you thought you could.
Yeah, and this is where it just gets into the nuances, because as much as I agree with that, I think we're also seeing quite a few sites in both our markets where there are sellers who are needing a quick deal, and we're actually seeing the market respond to that. Even this week, we've got some very strong offers in Houston on multiple sites that are quick deals, groups with 1031 money, groups that just want to go do deals that believe that there's a lot of momentum that's going to carry through for a couple of years, or longer, in Texas. And so the land business is so forward looking. It's not an indication necessarily of current value, but where the value is going to be in the next couple of years from a development standpoint. And it really just doesn't adjust like the stock market does. It adjusts is much slower, and it's based on the activity. And so we haven't seen it impact yet at all. You almost wouldn't know it's happening, but we're addressing it because we think that there could be an impact. And we don't really know how significant that's going to be. This is the kind of thing that could drag on for a really long time and have a big impact. It could also be something that over a weekend, in the next couple of weeks, there's an announcement that's made, or a tweet that goes out from Trump, and we're making a deal and everything's back to normal. I mean, there's so many things that could play out, and we're not necessarily trying to make a prediction on it, but we know that it's on people's mind and it's in the news, and people are watching the market every day. And I do think there's a big psychological impact that does have a real world impact when you see the Dow go down 2,000 points in a day, and you see oil drop into the 50s. Those things may not really impact the business in a real way immediately, and they may not at all long term. But I think psychologically, especially if you're a seller and you do want to make a sale, you're like, man, this is not good. This isn't what I want to see right now, even if that doesn't actually impact your property and the price of your property. And I've seen that just over the years, going through these big market adjustments, it just never feels good when you see the market really move and you see a lot of red on the screen, the stock market. What has been true, though, is a lot of times that hasn't really impacted our business like we thought, it would. And so I think that's just a good point to make.
Uncertainty is also just never good in our business. And so I think we're kind of back in this place of, like you said, this could be short-lived. It could take a while to work through this. Obviously, there could be some pretty negative effects if some dominoes fall a certain way. And so, that's never good. We entered the year with a lot of activity. The activities remain strong, but the longer that there's uncertainty, the more you're going to see groups starting to use that, not just as an excuse, but really, probably a valid excuse. And you may also have pricing start to creep back up a little bit. That's been a huge kind of just wind in the sails to start the year, as we've seen construction pricing come down. And so, where we're seeing it down maybe 10% in some cases, pretty significant savings for our clients on the industrial, on the multifamily side. But now maybe that's going to come back up. And so, we're hearing a little bit of that from clients, some clients less worried about it, others saying that they're going to start building in some contingency, just knowing that there's a good opportunity or good potential that there is going to be some additional cost.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that is one of the impacts that we could see is increased construction costs. And a lot of that is just going to depend on what happens. I mean, is this, a week's situation? Is it months? Is it longer term where there are certain things that you can't get or they become very expensive? We talked in past episodes about how there are so much of the lumber and the steel we can actually get from the United States, but there could be some of these components of construction that you need to get from another country. And if there's a prolonged tariff war with that country, maybe those things just become very expensive, or there's a delay in getting them. So to some extent, we can speculate on what's going to happen, but we really don't know. And there's a lot of things that could happen. And so I think just kind of watching it and seeing, how this plays out. And I definitely, but we say this so often, I'm so glad that we're in Texas, because I think whatever happens, there's going to be winners and losers. There always are in these kind of things. But I think Texas is a long-term winner. There's just so much momentum in Texas from a population growth standpoint. Even if you do have a lot of companies, with some more onshoring happening, I think that's going to end up benefiting Texas. We've already seen that with some major corporations, looking to put more money into Texas, make more of an investment to move people here, to move production here. And I think that's just going to continue. So, this could be one of those things where it's a short-term negative, but it's a long-term positive for Texas and for our markets. And I hope that that's the case. I really do believe that. So I don't think that we're any less bullish because of this. But at the same time, it is something that we do have to deal with in the short term, and trying to advise our clients the best we can and adjust to it.
Well, we'll be right there with our audience, obviously watching to see what's going to unfold over the coming days, coming hours, coming weeks and months with this. And we've talked about it. It's a negotiation. Mm-hmm. And that's what's so interesting about this is a negotiation. You're seeing that with, like you said, 70 countries starting to come to the table, and a lot of these world leaders, wanting to not being in a position where they can afford to not come to the table with the United States. Obviously, China is unique in that respect. And so we'll be watching with our audience. And I think I'd agree with what you just said, Tim, about long term. I think that we aren't concerned about this long term, but I also think that, there could be some short term impact, and it'll be interesting to see what that is. And so we wanted to have this conversation today just to give our audience a little bit of an insight look into just some of what we're seeing and hearing out there. And it's honestly, it's kind of all over the place, because we're all just trying to figure out, what direction this is going to go.
And maybe we could end, Tom, with just the advice that we're giving our clients and just what we think about this. I mean, what I would say is stick to your plan, whatever that is. So if you're a seller and you need to sell, you want to sell, there's really no reason not to push forward and to sell. There might be different situations, there are nuances where that's not the case, but for the most part, it's still a good market. We're seeing a lot of activity. We're seeing great pricing. Obviously, we're going to let our clients know if that changes. We're always good about telling people, hey, this is not the time if it's not the time, but we don't see that at all right now. We see a really strong market. There's good buyer activity. There's good offers. And if you're a buyer, I would say the same thing. Just continue with your plan. Don't listen too much to the rhetoric, and we should expect in this kind of negotiation that there's going to be some crazy rhetoric on both sides. And so you can't take it at face value. Expect them to say some kind of crazy things that are a little bit extreme, because they're trying to mess with the other side. And we see that all the time in our business when people negotiate. Sometimes you have people brokering each other and saying things. And it's like, I know you're saying that, but I know here's what you really want. And I think to remember that what both countries want in this situation, speaking of the U.S. and China, or just in general, countries do not want to be hurt by this. Now, they may end up getting hurt by this, and things could get out of control a little bit. But at the same time, I would just say continue with the plan, push forward, and that's what we're advising our clients to do, at least in the Houston market. I don't know what, Tom, if there's anything different in Dallas, but
I think that's good. No, I definitely agree. The only thing I'd add is I had 2 conversations yesterday with different landowners, and in both cases, I just advised them to, work with the bird in hand. They both had good development opportunities in hand from buyers, and instead of wondering what's out there, one of them was asking me, "What if I wait 12 months? What kind of a price increase am I going to see in 12 months?" And the reality is, in 12 months, it may go down, because right now we're sitting in this really unique place where we've had depressed activity for the last couple of years due to rates, and now there's just pent up demand in a lot of different use types. And so there's opportunities to find great opportunities, to get product on the ground, to be in an environment where there's less competition. So I can't say for certainty that 12 months from now, your land is going to, garner a higher price from a developer. And so anyway, I agree with what you said. If you have a plan, don't now put it on hold until all this gets resolved, especially if you have a live buyer and a qualified buyer, that has a way to get this done. I think that's good advice.
That's a great point. We're seeing that in Houston on several sites where we have really good buyers. They're good sites. We're getting great pricing. We mentioned that in other episodes. We're seeing really good pricing in this market across the Texas markets, especially Houston and Dallas. Pricing that's rivaling, some of the 2022 pricing on some of these sites. or even if it's not quite back to that, it's still they're really good pricing. They're good deals. We have several clients who are kind of well into the money on their site. And so I think if you have a real buyer and, or real buyers, make a decision and move forward, and don't just think, hey, I could get that little bit extra, if I just keep dragging it out and keep pushing. Maybe you will. Maybe this is not going to be a big deal, but the danger in our business is always the short term, is it will be worth more in 9 months or 12 months. We get the asset all the time, and we're really guessing. I hope so. Maybe it will be, but there could be reasons why it's not. And so I think I definitely agree with the bird in hand is a smart way to go.
Good, Tim. Well, it was fun today to do something a little bit different, a little bit shorter, a little bit in the moment. And so hopefully this was interesting to the audience. And like I said, we'll be interested to see what unfolds with this going forward. That's good, Tim. All right. Well, thanks.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. If you have questions about land you own in Texas, send us an email at texaslandguys@dmre.com and follow us on LinkedIn to stay updated.